Also, welcome at the TAXISPALAIS to the second Witch Talks, today with Neda Saeedi. I'm very happy that you are here. Neda, is always a pleasure and a privilege. And thanks also for the great works that we have here for still 1 month and already for 2 months. Neda Saeedi studied many things, so I won't mention all of them. But I think it's interesting when one looks at your work to also know the background that you studied also architectural restoration in Rasvin, in Iran. And then, following the studies, she studied sculpture in Tehran with Rafi Davtyan. And then she moved to Berlin, where she studied new media with Hito Steyer at the UDK. She has been exhibiting worldwide since many years, had exhibitions in museum, art centers and biennials. And currently, you can see 2 other shows where she also did new commissions, like for here. And this is, I would highly recommend the exhibition at the Staatliche Kunsthalle Baden-Baden, which is the inaugural exhibition by the new directors, Çağla Ilke and Adnan Yildiz. So they chose Neda as one of the position to place also a statement in which direction the institution should go in the future. And also at the Künstlerhaus Dortmund, and you also did a new work for this exhibition. She is also the recipient of the Villa Romana stipend in 2022. Exactly, so I would say we start. You have all seen the works that we will address. And I think, Neda, it's very pertinent to me that in your multimedia installations we have many elements, but never humans. So you show structures, settings, but yeah, humans do not appear. Why is this focusing on structures very important in your work?
So first of all, thank you for being here, for your time, and thank you for having me. So in my works, this is actually a good question that you're pointing at, because basically my work, most of the time, I'm exactly addressing the structures, right? The structure of politics, of power, like the structure of urban planning when it comes to and they are all basically man-made structures, and the role of the human being, let's say, is the one who made them. And then further on, it's I think in those structures, since I'm studying their functions, it's rather like taking off the maker and also the gears that are moving those structures that basically are the human beings that are working in those structures or living those structures, right? So when you take it down, what you have is basically the skeleton of it. So it's like taking down everything, like the skin and the flesh, and what stays is the skeleton, so you can see the structure below. So this is why I'm not using the human figure in a sense, or I'm not depicting it there, although it is there. So it's just also as an audience, because most of my installations are also kind of you can walk in them, or you should walk in them to experience them, and then you're back exactly in those structures that I kind of took you out of. So then you go in again, but it's a different experience, because then you have it more, I hope, more clear in a sense. Yes.
Yeah, it's also it's somehow the traces of humans which then even canalize the viewers or the visitors. And you chose to, or together we discussed that in this exhibition you show the two masters of ceremonies, so it's really from one room to three you create a field of tension, which shows here on the one hand the church, but you also show, this is a new commission called Ezekiel, Dreams Beyond Repair, but you transfer it also in the present. And I would suggest that we start with this piece and really dissect a bit the different elements and also this, but maybe we start with the idea how, what was important to you, because the church was the ideological, how can one say, I mean, it created the ideology of the witch hunt, which was then executed very effectively with the European nation states. But the ideology came from there, and you transferred in the present. What were your thoughts on this transfer?
Yeah, so I think I need to explain it a bit. I need to go back a bit in like my longer term, long-term project based on this research that I'm doing. So as you mentioned, I'm working a lot with the structures, right? So first, when I started this long-term project about like the governing, let's say, as such, like governing a nation, governing a city, governing like even a house. Basically, it's like when I started all this, like where comes the power position and how does it start to rule and based on what, right? So, of course, on one side we have the power that comes within the religion, and it's of course very, male position, talking about above us. And then it has at the same time the governing, in a sense that you decide who can how behave, it's like, this kind of like shaping and ruling at the same time. So I kind of like found this structure very clear in the history of gardening. And this is where all these works started that I'm doing since 5 years, I would say. But the beginning of this, it's like in general what I'm claiming or what I'm like looking at is like the garden is actually a micro version of a nation or of a state and so on, right? So, and then while I was like all the time kind of trying to figure out who's the gardener, which then in a sense is the lawmaker, then I came to the point that basically a lot of laws that still nowadays are in action are based on religion, right? And who gives this power to the lawmakers? Of course, the God. The God that doesn't exist, or we already came to the point that even if exists, maybe there's more of them, who says who's the real God and so on. Or whose God is the most powerful God. So then I came to the point to see like basically that what they are like suggesting, these lawmakers, religious figures, the politicians nowadays, is basically like profiting something. Like they're telling you about this future, and then if you want to be part of that future, you have to be you have to behave within certain structure or within certain rules. So it's like, and then of course, when we come back to the point of the witches, they were the ones that they were against the rules that were in action in their time. So in order to take them out or to kind of normalize or legalize what you are doing. You have to put some sort of dirt on them, I would say. And this is like how I came to this work here, which is, of course, within like the work basically is referring, or it's like kind of coming to, it's a new translation, I would say, of this passage in Old Testament that gives the story of Ezekiel, the prophet. And he's actually the one that kind of coined the image of the God, like his throne and his glory. So the Ezekiel had this dream on a day that he was supposed to become the prophet, but then it happened to him in exile. So he had this vision. I mean, I call it a dream because probably he was daydreaming, but so they call it a vision. So he had this vision of God that comes on a platform. I mean, of course, with all this, spectacle of light and, lightning and sound and so on. So the God comes with a, basically he sees this throne that is kind of carried by 4 angels, and the angels, each of them, they have 4 wings and 4 faces and so on. And he has this then it's a throne that is sitting on this platform. The God basically comes and tells that, okay, so this is the thing. I'm kind of telling you that either you people come back to worshiping me, or you're over. Like there's catastrophe is gonna happen and so on, right? This prophet thing, it's really interesting because then those 4 angels, they are all of course symbols. When you look at them in theology, they have 4 faces, for like an eagle, an ox, a lion, and a human being. So it's like birds, domesticated animals, wild animals, and human beings. So all the species we say. And then they have 4 wings, and then it's all from the 4 corners of the world, and so on. So it's all about the God who has the power or dominance over everything, right? And these are carrying the weight of the God with themselves. So whoever is not under that platform, it's doomed to be, it's doomed basically.
Exactly, and this is of course now already your interpretation, which I very much would confirm also, but of course in the vision of Ezekiel, this was because also even the wings touch each other, they have 4, so they can all touch each other and also protect themselves. But it's, of course, in his vision, it was the idea that this one,
there's
glory,
the one and only God
this
that
will
comes.
heal everything and connect. Actually, so the exclusion part was not this is the ex negativo version now that you are interpreting.
No, there is in this story actually there is this negative part. So the God comes with the message basically.
Yes.
That is either you are, under protection of me, who is already in power of everything, or you are, you're doomed to be.
Exactly. So the other gods actually, but it's rather even an exclusion of the idol. How do you say in English? Idolatry. So all the other gods and different beliefs are gone, and now it's the Almighty, which brings a healing for everyone.
Exactly, because Ezekiel and his people, they were actually in Babylon. They were in Babylon, and they started to worship the pagan gods. That was the problem. That's why he had the vision of this, So this is exactly how it was. There's either, the idea of there is only one right God. There is one right ideology. There is one right way of doing things. This is basically where I kind of caught me, I would say. That how obvious is that, and how we nowadays also believe in this. Either we think we are not religious, we are not, we are not in a frame of certain ideology, but when it comes to those points, it's like, yeah, of course this is the right way to do it.
So let's talk about the throne, because now, as you mentioned, as you told the story of Ezekiel, it's very interesting that really all the details of this story are reappearing in your installation. So we have a new kind of angels, extinct plants. We have the throne. The color is the same as in his vision. So maybe in this chair, let's start with the chair, this throne. I guess you all somehow felt that you know it, maybe not exactly from where, but it's chair of the EU Parliament in Strasbourg. So you, what does it mean? And also you found out how the design name of this chair is, and this is called Monsieur Paul, so Monsieur Politique, which is somehow unbelievable. I could not, astonishing, let's put it this way. So, and then of course you have the transparency with the plexi.
Exactly.
So maybe you talk a bit about the materials, because I think in all your works you make really a deeper research, and then you, at the same time, you very much think of every detail in the installation, but also every material that you use.
Yes. So the plants that are actually the representation of the angels who were under dominance of the god are the plants that they, for quite long time, I mean, they are plants from the four corners of the world. Basically, they are different continents. Unfortunately, like Europe is excluded in that sense. It's like this America, Australia, Asia, and Africa. And the plants are the ones that they are for a long time now extinct in the wild. Also, this is also a term that I found out about when I was doing the research on this work, that they are basically a bunch of plants that they don't grow on themselves in their native habitat anymore, and they are only there to be breeded. So basically they are under control. Like, of course, and then we have all this, long history of the relation between plants and, colonial history and power positions and so on and so forth. So, and plants are also, like, in many different cultures, the symbols of different nations. And I mean, even nowadays, like, you have, the plant that is like symbol of any also European, American, or any other country, basically. And then at the same time, since they are not, they don't have a root anymore in their native land. So that's why that they don't have a root also in the installation. And the roots are replaced with these brushes that are for deep cleaning surfaces. So it's also like to make a hegemony, you need to have this flat surface that is all, in the same level of, a flat surface, basically. You don't need to have, purity, in a sense. And yeah, the plants are like the angels, basically the translation of those angels that they are under the dominance of the god, are those plants that basically you can buy them in any supermarket nowadays, like a certain type of orchids, for instance, that I use. You can really buy it in any supermarket, even. So, but they don't exist basically, in a sense, in their natural forms. They exist in a form that we gave them, in a shape of, like, you know, they are behaving within the rules, right? And if not, then they don't exist. It's like either this or not. And of course, the round, transparent surface, it's like, you know, democracy is round. There's no distance between, you know, you don't have, I mean, all the parliaments are round. So it's about also democracy, and it's about transparency. But who is carrying the weight of that democracies are the one that basically are under the dominance of it. And of course, the throne is, for me, was also a shock to find out about the name of it, Monsieur Peul. And I'm like, why is not Mademoiselle Peul? So, yeah, and then this is also something that I need to mention, that actually this throne of God has repeated itself then in other religions, also because the Ezekiel actually is from Judaism. Then we have it, of course, in Christianity. The perfect depiction of it is actually the St. Peter chair in Vatican. And there's always this prophecy which is about the, you know, in St. Peter chair, in the altar, we see it also very well because there's this, you know, the Holy Spirit and the window up there, and everything is like pointing to that window, which is going to be to the heaven and to the sky and so on. But in this work, what I have instead of that rose window, or like, you know, the window that normally you have into the altars that point to the to a bright future, if you are
if you are
loyal to the God, then you're gonna get that, you know, as reward. But in this sense, as I'm a bit like pessimist about the whole thing, so what you have is a black hole. There is no future. There is no bright future that comes if we continue as we are doing now.
I mean, you have a bit like it's. One could think from far away, there's the green light of hope, because it's also green is also a color which appears then in Ezekiel's vision. But then if one goes closer, one also sees that this is a trick of reflection, and actually it's not so deep and not so bright shining as it appears from far away. And of course you have the black glasses on the sides which really take away every light, which suck
every light in.
Every light. And in Ezekiel it's the opposite, of course. There's light everywhere, a lot of fire, bright light.
Yeah, I mean, I try to, again, as I'm trying to show the backbone of any structure that I'm trying to show, is like you have to take all the ornaments down, also the light, because light is fascinating. And this is also how you always have this vision. I mean, wherever there is light, this is also something interesting to me in general, that wherever there is light, especially in art history, it's about basically nothing. It's about this nothingness. Whenever you want to depict something that actually doesn't exist, or you don't know about its existence, you have light.
Right, can figure for everything, even for the things bigger than this human world. Yes. So I would say that what becomes very clear in this work is that if we want to change, the infrastructures which led to the witch hunt, and which in other scenarios in our present are still working very brutally, like who we exclude, also who, because even if the system, so this is also an interesting point, that these plans are not the plants from Europe, so they are carrying this weight, but they are not, they cannot even profit from this democratic idea. So not everybody, as we know, has the privilege to really take also the good things of the system, but it's, yeah, with the exclusion of many, then some can profit from this. But what I would say that your works in really managed to create this symbolic scenarios, symbolic settings where it's very clear that, I mean, the Berlin Biennial already used this title, but I thought already great title at the Berlin Biennial. I would reuse it for your work, this Tina Turner song. We don't need another hero.
Yeah.
I think this is like what becomes very obvious. Like we have this throne, we don't want actually one figure or instance to sit there and to be the only judge of justice and life and truth and whatever. Exactly. Maybe we go to your second work, where the other big force of which was so crucial, or which necessitated the witch hunts to exclude women or to control women's sexuality and their knowledge, their bodies and their role in society, which was, as Silvia Federici pointed out, very pointedly burgeoning capitalism. And then you show in your work a more recent example, because as we all know, this story maybe a bit differently, but the mechanisms and the steps which take place when capitalism is spreading further, taking new areas, are very similar. So your example comes from the 1970s. Exactly. And it was the Westernization period in Iran.
I am an object.
Yes, maybe you say what we see. We can start with a projection, because
my body
it's another
cracks.
great symbol that you create. So you don't have to know anything when you stand in front of this work, but you see there are animals and humans trying to move forward. They are nomad tribe, and they cannot move forward. They are stopped in their route, and they are sucked in an architecture. So it's very clear moving image. Yeah. Maybe you tell us a bit about the Bakhtiaris and also this architecture that you built, from where it comes.
It's going to be also quite long.
Yeah, let's go for
this one too.
I am of no use.
So basically, of course, the project is referring to this settlement project with the second Pahlavi, Muhammad Reza Shah, but actually it all started with the first Pahlavi, Reza Khan. And that comes because it was shortly after that they found oil in Iran, and then the Pahlavis, they came to power, and then this is exactly the area that the Bakhtiaris is Bakhtiaris territory, I would call. So they live there for a longer time. Actually, there are already evidences of them living there over 500 years as a nomadic tribe. They also live in cities. They are like a big ethnic group. And they are actually also well educated, or they were, I unfortunately have to say, they were well educated, wealthy people. It's not that they were only in a shape of nomadic tribe, and that was also one of the reasons that the Pahlavi dynasty or family, they felt the urge that they have to kind of fight them back, otherwise it's going to be problematic for their development in that their area, which is, as I said, where the entire, it's the oil region, and at the same time it has 70% of the surface water of the entire country. So it's a really important region. But, and also additional to that, Bakhtiaris, they never kind of left their area or never got involved in the political situation in Iran. It was first time for them to get involved during the constitutional revolution, which happened 100 years ago. So they helped the freedom fighters to occupy Tehran, so the revolution actually won and happened. So, and that was an alarming thing for the Pahlavis. They were like, okay, these people, they have money, they have weapons, and there are many of them, and so on. So they felt the urge to kind of bring them under the control. So Reza Khan did it, but with the force of military. And when he was overthrown, it kind of, they went back to their movement, and they went back because he scattered them basically entire country, so they were not, as powerful anymore.
Entire lives cycled and passed through a single
second
migration.
Pahlavi, he was quite, he studied in Europe, right? So he had better ideas, and he came with the idea to settle down the nomads within the frameworks of civilizing them and give them a better life, a modern life. He also wrote this book, kind of also disturbing. He called them, they live like animals, and he needs to bring them, good life as a king, as a good father of the nation. So what he did, it was actually not, he had two motivations. One was this, and the other was that the Americans, they embargoed Cuba in late 50s, and then of course it was also their sugar supply was coming from Cuba. So they needed also a new supplier. So they came to Iran, and they built a test field that is still working nowadays. It's called Haftape in the region, to see if and that was the first time that sugar cane was planted, like industrial way of it, was planted in Iran. And so they were quite surprised that it worked very well. So that's how they became, they moved to that region to build more sugar factories and sugar farms. And so it was like, a perfect situation. They could settle down the nomads, bring them under the control, which is of course also like, they were like in movement, right? And when something is movement, it's quite like a liquid thing. You cannot really catch them. You cannot grasp them. So you need to bring them in a solid form. And the best way to make something solid in that sense is like to settle them down. And then on that other hand, it was also like, so they become the workers of the factory. So it's a win-win, right? So this is how it started. So they started to build a dam, which is the Des Dam. And that was like, still a catastrophe, environmental catastrophe. So, but also for the nomads, they couldn't pass by the river anymore because the water came too high. And then on the other hand, when they would pass the river somehow, the other side was dry, right? So this was a problem already for them. So instead of using military force, he started to kind of, make their borders smaller and smaller to the point that they cannot survive anymore out there. So they become, willingly they go to the city. So, and then they of course build a city for them, separated from the old city in that area, which is called Shushtar No. So the old city is called Shushtar, and there is this town that they built called Shushtar No,
a new town.
A new town, exactly.
New town.
So, and it's basically a walled city. No car can get in. Buildings or like apartments, they are back to back, so you have no contact with your neighbors. And all the streets, they are dead end. So if you want to socialize, you have to come to the center of the city, which is look like a cross. And then of course, when you walk in that area, you already have the feeling that you're watched and you're kind of, your movement is quiet in a certain way. And this city was designed and built by Kamran Diba, who is accidentally the cousin of the queen. Yeah.
And a very famous
Very
architect.
famous. He actually got a prize for that city. He got the Aga Khan very famous architectural prize. And so the city is, as I said, designed in the sense that there is no contact between different houses. And we should again think about that these people, they were living in a social kind of, community way of living. So their style is like it's a tribe. There is no my house, your house, my kid, your kid. So they are all a big family. So they were like scattered in these buildings. And then for me, basically, this project was about how you change the certain way of lifestyle when it's like from liquidity. Also, liquidity in that sense is also an economic term, right? And how you transfer that liquidity into credit, into real money, right? So that's one part. And the buildings, the houses, they were designed, they're extremely small. I don't know if you walked into the installation, but these are based on the real size of the rooms. Of course I put them together, it's like, but they are the real size of those apartment units. And just imagine that people that they were like moving freely in a big region now have to live in these small rooms, right? So it's still even like, the movement becomes, because they don't need to move anymore, they have to, keep the power and go work in the factory and make something out of that energy. There is no reason to move, right? Yeah, and the reason also I used the specific design for this, the way that I put it into each other is exactly after another piece, architectural piece by Kamran Diba. He made this prayer, kind of a critical design that he made, like critical to religion in a sense. He made a prayer room in a park in the central Tehran, and then he made it exactly like this. So it's a labyrinth. You enter, there is no window, and then you get in, but there is no roof, right? So you have the feeling that you're kind of in this confusing space, and there is no roof, so you can, like someone is looking at you. You get the feeling, so it's God looking at you. So he's like commenting there that like how religion is a confusing and controlling power, but then when it comes to like this new religion that is capitalism, he used exactly the same structure and the same dynamic to give this feeling to the people who are going to live in that buildings.
Yeah, because the prayer room he built before. So
yes,
this was,
that was before, exactly.
Yeah,
that was he did it, I think, like right after his graduation, he made the prayer. And this one is like few years after. And the reason that, of course, I use the roofing materials here instead of having it on the roof is like
coming on the wall.
Exactly, comes as like something that is going to, put border around these people. And yeah, this is basically how you capitalize the force or the labor of people and their movement, and you bring it, I mean, you turn this liquidity into a capital, so you can use it in that sense.
Settling down, and of course the end of subsistence economy and the commons, of course. So all so it's somehow very interesting how, not new, but every time
also like
remarkable to
it's
recognize.
Again, imported by Americans, you know, whenever it comes to that point.
Or by Europeans, because in the witch hunt this was exactly, so I mean it's very, I really see that this, how when the labor force was first created, the idea of labor force completely dependent on wage labor, and then coming with the second part with this reproductive labor, which is not even paid for. But you have the same in this example, and many more,
can I
of
add
course.
Something?
Yeah.
About reproduction, and also the role of female members, because in a I mean, especially in the Bakhtiari tribe, there is no like gender hierarchy. There was no gender hierarchy. They had leaders, like female leaders and male leaders. So there was always, and there is no, you know, in general, they don't have that much of hierarchy in their relations, also within themselves and like the animals and their livestock. It's like, you know, the child is as dear as a like sheep, right? Because it's all something that functions all together. If one is missing, then the whole thing is gonna fall apart. Inside the installation, there's a sculpture and there's a sound piece, right? So it's about this also reproduction, because like the female members of the tribe, they had basically, after settling down, they would also go into the role of a mother and someone who gives birth to labor or to the future, you know, labor force, and also to take care of it. So basically it's like reducing also the role of female members of the tribe into something that is only basically providing to the whole system of capitalism in a sense. And then what we have there is like, there is this water skiing bag that they were using for many things. For carrying water, processing milk, like making boats, and even like music instruments. So it's all also about moving, that is producing something for the community. What actually I did with, I filled it with concrete, which is, you know, quite a symbol of modernization.
Again, I think it's again another symbols of yours which makes clear the whole process as a projection on the first side. Inside you have this heavy weight, and of course it's also it's material from the building.
Yes. So this is like when you and then to take that out, or to give birth to something, to this new lifestyle, to this modern kind of abstract lifestyle, I had to destroy or tear down the skin. And I mean, when you look at it, it looks quite like, you know, figurative in a sense. It's headless, of course, but you can recognize the body. But it's heavy also, it doesn't move, you know, it's kind of like a dead body that is inside the house. I cannot move, it cannot go out. It's just like reproducing the whole dynamic.
Yeah, it's a domesticated and cultivated as your plant sculptures in the first sculpture. But I think that, so we talked about that there are no humans figuring in your pieces, but for the sound piece of this work, you chose to write a speculative storytelling from a subject position that you actually cannot take, that we cannot take. From it does not become 100% clear, but probably a goat or a sheep, which was part of this nomad tribe, and I find it, very interesting, and to see that this speculative perspective, which one might call it maybe an attempt of empathy, as a first step to, even if we cannot take this position, to somehow see, to try to see it from this perspective, which has to follow the traces and the rules that we set, and that we will also suffer from as it becomes more and more apparent these days. So maybe you can talk a bit about or elaborate on this impossible perspective that you chose for the storytelling.
I mean, the storyteller, because again, with this type of lifestyle, I mean, I have to say that I was very inspired for the piece, for the sound piece, I visited the Sami Museum in North Sweden, in Jokkmokk, which is the capital of the nomads from, North Europe. It's like Norway, Sweden, part of Russia and Finland. The Sami people is so I visited their museum, because they are also now, they already got some of their rights back, but they're still in constant, struggle with the governments to get their rights back. And they have this museum that tells their story. And I was quite inspired by that museum, because there also you could see how this narration moves between different generations and different subjects. And they had also one sound piece that was from one of the shamans of the tribe, who was telling a story, but he was telling the story from a drum. From the perspective of a drum. Mm-hmm. And what is the role of drum, that specific drum, in the whole ceremonies and ceremonies and rituals that they are doing. And then I was quite inspired by that. And then, of course, I did some research around, also the Bakhtiaris and so on. But as I said, I understood that there is no hierarchy. So for the perspective, basically, it's also not that it's not one person who's telling the story. It's shifting. It's from an old lady, I would say, who's 1,000 years old, to a ship, to a baby, to a man, to a lady. It's shifting.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because this is the author's perspective. I thought very much from a sheep, but then I did also not know why from a sheep and not a goat, because on the projection we see more goats. So it's interesting, but it's an impossible perspective.
Exactly, because it's about also this collective understanding and collective memory of a tribe. Basically we have, all of us, we have a memory of, our ancestors. So for them, maybe because they are practicing a certain lifestyle, that this memory is more present. And they know, so that's why it's also kind of a fluid character.
That's why also I like very much your works together with Esther's works, because it's a perfect match. You can already prepare for your question, because it does not feel to me, but we are already almost talking an hour.
Really?
So I will just ask one last question, because this talk is, as I told you, also part of our collaboration with ICOM and their 17 times 17 SDG project. So the SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, with 17 goals for a healthy planet and equality, and 17 institutions, museum and art centers were invited to do projects in this framework, and it was chosen by chance who does what. So we are dealing with poverty, and I think that both your works, of course, yeah, we talked about it, it's about the structures and everything, and I see all the structures which lead to poverty in them. We discussed also now with capitalism, but also with the system of exclusion and the raising throne of the one and the others, which carry the weight. But what would you say, what do we do now, and what also in the context of art is possible in order to change this? So of course in these spaces we don't have to set these rules, because of course we all want that there's no poverty in 2030. At the same time, it's hard to believe that there won't. So what can we do? And all your work is very political, and I think it's a big motivation also to do all this research and then to express it. But maybe you talk about.
I mean, it's quite hard to say for me as an artist. I'm not a scientist. This is not my field of expertise. But what I'm pretty sure about, this is not going to work. What they already have as planned. I have to mention the work that I've done. I'm showing right now in Baden-Baden, because it's quite interesting that there, actually, the point of departure of that project was actually something that came from the UN, from their sustainable project that they have, sustainability project, and it was to this process of how do you call it? To kind of like, how do you call it? I lost the word. To, like, let's say, to make the desert green. I started in the Gulf countries in 70s. There were 2 experts from UN for the specific Sustainable Future project that they suggested to use a specific plant, which is kind of like, drought tolerant and so on and so forth, to, to reach that goal, to have a green area around Dubai. And it was kind of put in action through this company, which is back then was called Dubal. It's like Dubai Aluminium. And now they changed it, and it's a governmental thing. Back then it was a private company. Anyhow, so they got the suggestion and the advisory to use that specific type of plant in that area for, this fighting against the desertification. And what happened basically is that that specific plant is an invasive plant. And it started from Dubai, but now all the countries in that region, including Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Emirates, they are all in a crisis because they cannot get rid of that tree. It's basically killing almost all of the native trees. It's causing health issues, like, lung problems, heart problems. It's attacking infrastructures because the routing system, of course, it's good for, when you have it in drought, but they didn't think that, okay, there's going to be in cities, and then there are all the piping system. So there is every day, like, a problem with the pipings because they basically break the pipes. And go, and they're taking all of the underground water resources. So this is not working. Like, I don't know what is the solution, but I would say maybe going back to local people and asking them how they were. I'm not someone who's against, modernization and, like, new science and so on. Of course, in many cases also it works, and it's like, it's a great thing to do, but they have to kind of go to the locals and ask them what was their solution till now for drought, for instance. Like, how are they fighting that? Like, you cannot bring a very a crop, for instance, like sugar cane to an area which is like, it needs a lot of water and it's a monocrop and so on. You cannot bring it there and then take the water away from other farmers, and then after 10 years you stand there like, oh, now we need to find a solution. So I don't know what is the solution there, but I think like importing ideas without thinking about the context and the specific regions is not the solution.
No, and there are, of course, of the story that you told, there are many similar.
Many of them, exactly.
Know that this cannot be the solution, but of course to have these goals as such is not. It's not bad. It's rather maybe even good. But I also agree that, it's very unlikely that they will put into place. So it's good to have this motivation, but what can we do in this? Would you say that what we can do in the arts, where we don't have to set these, work in this attention economy, and where we don't have to formulate the exact goals with all their blind spots and mistakes and traps, is the solution to focus on the structure and the systemic problems, to make them more aware and to hope that...
Yeah, I mean, I would say as an artist, I said, okay, again, only about me, myself, like, I need to, like, for my works, of course, like, I need to do works that maybe bring more awareness about these problems that we have. Of course, I don't have a solution for them, but maybe I can just make the awareness, make like, snap, hey, look here. Also, like, on top of that, maybe I should stop making trash, to be honest, and travel less. These are, small steps, but this is something that helps.
Yeah,
in many senses.
But this is not something which comes in the materials, yes, but in the artwork itself, it's, you focus on this, what needs to be changed in order to, and if it would not be like it, we would not even have these symptoms that now we need the SDGs to solve.
Yes.